What's up, Jets fans, and welcome to episode 3 of JetNation Live. We are your hosts, Dylan Tereman and Glenn Naughton. Folks, it only took 3 weeks for us to sit here and talk about a victory, and this one feels pretty damn good. Knowing that the Jets have a little bit of fight in them, and even when it felt like all hope was lost, it was a good feeling, and obviously the football gods being on our side was a good thing too. So, Glenn, how we doing? How we feeling a couple days removed from this big Jets victory?
Feeling great. So much of what the Jets needed to happen happened in this game. The way the rookies played was so encouraging. The young guys, not just the rookies, but some of the younger players. We saw some good work from Elijah Moore, from Brandon Eccles. Of course, Garrett Wilson was the story of the day, and the Jets took advantage of some Browns miscues. And they made some mistakes, and Nick Chubb has even come out and said that he cost them the game by running into the end zone on that final touchdown and not taking a knee to run out some clock. So, but the Jets did what they had to do. I mean, the onside kick recovery is the most miraculous thing. You just don't see that anymore. It doesn't happen. Even when you know it's coming, you just kind of think there's no way they're getting this. So credit to Will Parks for blasting Amari Cooper to get him away from the football. Will Parks, great job there. And all around, some things need to get better. We talked about the run defense and how we were concerned, cautiously optimistic because they played well in week 1, but you knew this was going to be a bigger challenge. And they got beat up on the ground a little bit, but as the year progresses, let's see if Cleveland does that to everyone. I mean, that's a good O-line, and those are 2 good running backs. And it's not like they ran, I forget what the total numbers were, but it's not like they ran for, 180, 190. But they did wear the Jets down, and they were able to kind of beat them up late in the game.
Yeah. I think it was about 140 or 150 they ended with. But before we dive too deep into the recap, I just want to go over all of our topics tonight. First and foremost, we'll spend most of the time speaking about the miraculous comeback in Cleveland, the miracle in the land, as the Jets Twitter admin has called it. We'll give our standouts, some key players. We've had a lot of time to go over the all 22. I know I've had a lot more time than Glenn this week, but we'll just give our thoughts from that. And then we're going to obviously preview week 3 with the Bengals, how we think the Jets can advance to 2-1, kind of a wild statement saying that out loud. And then we'll go over some of Cincinnati's key personnel, some of their players and matchups to watch. And obviously at the end, we'll go over some NFL talk, NFL draft talk, and give some prospects names that we want you guys to keep an eye on. So first, getting right into it, you mentioned a lot of it there. A lot of young players stepped up in the 31-30 improbable victory in Cleveland. ESPN Analytics had the Browns at 99.9% win chance after that Chubb touchdown. I know you said he regrets it and says he should have gone down, and I think we'll touch on that a little bit. I have some questions for you, but after that and the missed extra point, they had him at 99.9% win chance. Story of the day, absolutely. Jets rookies led by Garrett Wilson showed up big time. Wilson, 102 yards on 8 catches, 2 touchdowns. Should have been more touchdowns. Breece Hall, 49 total yards on 8 total touches and a touchdown. His first time in the end zone as a professional. The offense, just on the surface level here, offense was on fire, matching touchdown for touchdown. I tweeted it out and said I didn't think the Jets would be able to match touchdown for touchdown in this game, and it looked like that's what they were going to have to do. Defensively, they were pretty bad, but they showed up in key moments. We'll get into the key stops and whatnot there, but they had 2 crucial tackle for losses and then a sack that really swung some momentum in the defense's favor late in the second half. Special teams, I think, was the savior of the afternoon at 3 separate times. You mentioned it there, Will Parks, additional shout out to him. He actually liked my tweet. I just put Will Parks in all caps and he liked it on Twitter. That was great. So it's 3 separate times the special teams came in and was clutch. And then the fourth element, which I know you touched on in your recap a little bit, and I don't like touching on it a ton, but that was a rookie referee there in Trey Blake, and it clearly showed. There was a lot of people talking about missed calls in the Jets' favor and so back and forth either way. It was bad. The officiating was very bad, very rookie-like, so we didn't like to see that. Injuries, though, positive note on injuries. Everybody finished the game. There were a couple people that got hurt. They all came back and finished the game, and they will be evaluated throughout the week. Third down, 8 for 15. I think this is a category that I'm most intrigued by every game by the Jets. 8 for 15 is much improved from I believe it was 2-14 last week. So
14,
just,
I think, yeah.
yeah, just absolutely awful last week. Now we're up to 53.5%. So much better. 1 for 1 on fourth down, obviously just a fake. And then 3 for 4 in the red zone. I think that's tremendous, 75%, with most of them becoming touchdowns. I think 3 of the 4 became touchdowns. Obviously, the only one was the Joe Flacco strip sack that obviously they lost possession on that one. So just on the surface, Glenn, I just wanted to ask you, how high does this win rank for you? I've seen a lot of other outlets talking about excitement level with this win, and they've brought up, Darnold in Detroit. I also added Decker in overtime versus the Patriots as games just to be excited about as a fan. So does this rank anywhere amongst them with you, knowing the direction of this team as opposed to 2018 or 2015?
Yeah, listen, I said after the game that I thought that this would be one of the most memorable games Jets fans will ever see in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels weird because, it's not the postseason. It's week 2. You're playing the Browns, which, by the way, quick segue. Who are these Browns fans? Like, I can't believe we lost to the Jets. Like, you're the Browns. You have no right to say anything, even if we want to say the Jets are next to last in terms of like teams you should be most embarrassed to lose to. The Browns are like, oh my God, we lost to the Jets. Shut up. You really?
Yeah.
If there's one team that has nothing to say about losing to anyone, that's the team.
Exactly.
And listen, but yeah, that win, I said after the game, it'd be one of the most memorable games. I almost said, I can't remember, I may have said it. It'd be kind of like the Monday Night Miracle against the Dolphins, and that's kind of where this is.
Wow.
Look, there's no playoff implications. It's not a great team. But just the fact, you said it, 99.9% chance they would lose that game, and they come back and win. That is ridiculous. I've seen a couple people like, oh, relax, it's a week 2 win. I'm like, yeah, but it's also like literally about as miraculous a win as you can get. You can't, they can't say it's 100% likelihood until the game is over. Right. So it is. You cannot have a less likely chance to win a football game than the Jets did. And they stepped up, and it was, again, big plays from the kids. Joe Flacco was cool. He was much, much better this week, obviously. It's right up there. It's sort of, it's got to be like top 4 or 5 for me in terms of just the shock factor. Like, oh my God, I can't believe that just happened. And that was right when I went to, right when I did the post-game video. I'm thinking in my head, what can I compare this game to? Right. And all that came to mind was like Monday Night Miracle. Like that, it's a game that you're watching just because you're a fan, and we love torturing ourselves and watching this team be terrible. But you're just watching that game thinking there's no way they're going to win this game. Especially once Chubb scored that touchdown, I was like, oh, well, I said I almost I almost left the audio on and just came and do the video. You know what? Let's watch just in case. Right. And the onside kick recovery. What is it? That's like 1 out of 100. The teams convert on with the rule change. So so much had to happen that did happen. Jesus, I'm thinking. Imagine you put $5 on the Jets to win when it was at 99.9%. That's like
probably
I can't imagine what odds
or something.
Yeah. But so it's up there, man. It was thrilling, Cleveland or not. But how crazy is it that the last time that happened, it happened to the Browns?
Right. I did see that stat about however 2,200 consecutive games where
2,229 consecutive games where teams were leading by 13 with less than 2 minutes to go. They had won 2,229 in a row. And the last team to do it was the Browns. The Jets, how did we lose to the Jets? You're the Browns.
Yeah. How do you lose to the Jets? Not how do we beat the Browns? Like
Yeah, give me a break.
Bad teams.
I saw one of them was like, "Oh, they're the worst team in football."
Not true.
Listen, the Jets are bad, but come on now.
Not worse than the league. Absolutely not.
Yeah. I should say the Jets have been bad.
Sure, exactly.
There are definitely some teams that are well below the Jets this year.
Still bad. Yeah, exactly. We're trending up. You can see. Yeah. For me, obviously, I think emotionally it ranks pretty high. I put Decker against the Patriots in there because I think that was the height of Jets excitement overall, and we all knew, okay, now go into Buffalo, take care of business, and it's good. And then I would think hindsight kind of puts this win above it, because obviously if we had beat Buffalo, then the Patriots game would probably be number 1 for everybody. But we lost to Buffalo, we didn't make the playoffs. This time now we have a young team. early on in the season. They needed a win to prove to themselves that they could, hang with everybody. They're not going to be a team that's going to lay down. I don't want to use Dan Campbell's knee biting quote, but that's essentially what they did on Sunday. They got knocked down and they kept getting back up. But let's get a little bit more into it. I think, it was a great game emotionally. And you could tell it was a lot better offensively. I'll get right into it. Offensive line for me was the most improved position of the week. Obviously, Garrett Wilson was the most improved player from week 1 to week 2, but as a unit, offensive line stepped up big time, gave Flacco way more time to throw downfield, and it showed. Obviously, the Corey Davis big explosion play was a breakdown in coverage, but Flacco normally wouldn't have that time week 1 against the Ravens to even get the ball 20 yards. So I put down some numbers here about Flacco. Average depth of target, 5.7 to 10.5. And that's all in correlation of time to throw from the offensive line. So that's great. And then in the run game for the offensive line, 5.6 yards per carry in the first half. So offensive line, to me, standouts all across the board. Obviously, there were some weaknesses here and there, especially up from the tackles, which I felt like they did a good job game planning for the most part on the tackles. Joe Flacco, obviously 307 yards. It's weird. He's thrown for 307 exactly week 1 and week 2. Very consistent Joe. Obviously 4 touchdowns, not the same result as last week. Big boom in touchdowns. Again, 0 turnover worthy plays. I know we talked last week about that being somewhat of a misleading stat, but for as many passes as the Jets have thrown, to have 0, according to PFF, we'll call it 1 with an asterisk. Turnover worthy play on 100 snaps is very good. I mentioned it, average depth of target more than doubled. And then rookie of the day, Garrett Wilson, 14 targets, 102 yards, 2 touchdowns. This is the interesting one to me. He had 3 red zone targets last week against Baltimore on limited time. And we said, everybody that is a Jets fan said, play 17. Hashtag play 17 was going around all week. He had 5 red zone targets this week, and he played a ton more snaps. I was listening to Underdog Fantasy with Josh Norris and Hayden Winks, and they said Garrett Wilson has more targets inside the 10-yard line with 7 than any other pass catcher has inside the red zone. So you back up 10 more yards, and Garrett Wilson still has more touches in the red zone, more targets, than all of those. And it showed. He was open on most of the key plays. The Flacco scramble, the strip sack, he was getting opened. It wasn't to his play side, but there were plays where Garrett Wilson was open and not even looked at or thrown to. So he was cutting everybody up on defense for the Browns. He didn't flinch after the big drop, and he was named Pepsi's Rookie of the Week. As far as the game plan, I mentioned it just a little bit there. I have a tweet here that I'll read. In the first half, which is mostly their scripted game plan, the Jets had 34 offensive snaps, 20 pass, and 14 run. On their 20 dropbacks, 13 snaps of their 20 had 6 or more blockers, with 7 of those having a block and release. So out of those total plays of 35, do you think that was enough plays where they were chipping enough? Because to me, after that strip sack, I went back and I was starting to question, are they doing enough on the outside? They did a lot in the second half. We'll get into it. But in the first half specifically, were you nervous about how much attention they were putting on the tackles, specifically Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney?
Well, if you would have told me before the game that would have been the plan, I would have been a little bit worried. But really, the Jets tackles, they weren't great, but they got the job done, and Max Mitchell, I hear a lot of people, talking about the way he's playing, and I feel like he's playing better than I expected. He's not playing great, but you got to give him a ton of credit. I mean, rookie late round pick, second pro start going against Myles Garrett. I was convinced this was going to be a 3-sack day for Garrett. And he almost got to Flacco another time or two. Of course, on these, second to last play from scrimmage, he almost got the sack from behind. But the Jets tackles, they played well enough to hold them to, and really on the Garrett sack, that was a mental thing. Someone didn't block him. He just I'm sure there weren't a ton of plays drawn up where they said on this play we're going to give Myles Garrett, a free run at the quarterback.
Right, right.
That was so really we didn't see Myles Garrett at any point beat up a tackle and get to the quarterback for a sack. So I thought they didn't double as much as I thought they would or should, but credit to those guys. They did a really nice job. Laken Tomlinson on the inside. I know, statistically, of course, yeah, Garrett Wilson, most improved guy, but I
Yeah,
thought Laken Tomlinson from week 1 to week 2. I mean, he had a couple of plays where honestly, I mean, he got the job done. But I saw 1 or 2 plays where he splayed out like he was holding on for dear life.
right. Yep.
And it's like, well, he's not exactly dominating that guy, and he's probably screaming at the top of his lungs while he's doing that because you see his legs just go whoosh, and he just starts sliding backwards.
Yep, yep.
But he did the job, and that didn't happen in week 1. So
Right.
really, I think he was, to me anyway, was probably the most improved guy. Of course, in terms of production with the ball, it'd be Garrett Wilson. But yeah, the tackles held their own, man. They did a nice job.
Yeah, I was certainly impressed. I've highlighted Max Mitchell, I feel like, in almost every weekly game plan article that I put out for JetNation.com. And I feel like it's for good reason because he is so young and inexperienced that every time there is a veteran pass rusher that even has
He's
a
gonna,
little
he's
bit
gonna,
of
those are the guys he's going
accolades,
to face. Those guys.
that's the guy that they're going to target. Exactly. So,
And
my
every week, that's going to be a key matchup because
yep,
every team has a best pass rusher, and every
yep.
week that best pass rusher is going to see what they can do against the rookie.
Exactly. And this week they have two, just like the Browns. But
Mm-hmm.
following up with the offense still, I wanted to ask, I don't know if you've seen the rankings, team rankings, but the Jets are 8th in total offense and 3rd in passing. I think they're 26th, they're 23rd in rushing. So not that great, but we know because game script passing has been their mantra the last 2 games. But 8th in total offense, 3rd in passing. Are you a little bit surprised by that? Or are you kind of, feel a little as expected with how it's gone the first 2 weeks?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't have expected them to be ranked that high, but of course, a lot of that is going to be that second half of that Baltimore game,
Mhm.
where it was a lot of just sort of dink and dunk, and they got a lot of easy yards in that game. So, when you're talking about 2 games and one of them was really, it was only close for a half. It's nice. I'll say it's nice to see the kids playing as well as we hope they would.
Mhm.
As far as the rankings, I'm not going to look too much. Like week 4 or 5, I think is when you're going to have a better picture of where
Yeah,
this
first
offense
benchmark.
is. Because when it's 2 games, it just takes one big performance to skew the numbers, or one bad. Both works both ways. You can be a great offense that has a shaky week 1 or 2, and it's like, oh, you're 23rd in the league. Then
Yep.
end of the season comes and you're 4th.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that showed in their scoring category because they were like 25th in scoring or 29th in scoring week 1, and now week 2 they were 15th. So
Right.
every week it's going to jump until, yeah, like you said, week 4 or 5 we'll get to that first checkpoint in the season and look back and really say, wow, okay, we were able to maintain a top 10, 12, 13 offense in the first quarter of the season,
Right.
and then we really look back and be like, wow, that's sustainable in this offense. And I think it can be, especially with Mike LaFleur having a much better game plan schematically for the Browns game versus the Ravens game. And I'm not saying it was a bad game plan for the Ravens, but going back and watching the all 22 a little bit more on the Browns, there were plays where he was really attacking what the Browns were doing defensively and making it not look easy, but with the combination of the talent at playmaker, at receiver, and tight end that we actually have now, he was making it somewhat look easy against the Browns defense. So I thought that was really cool to highlight. And I hope, yeah, top 10 offense, top 12 offense is a little bit more sustainable down the road.
Yep. And the talent's there, man. The talent's
Hey,
there. It's just gonna be about, is the QB play consistent?
yep, for once the talent is there. Yeah, exactly. QB play. All right, flipping over, defensive side of the ball, a couple shout outs that I wanted to give. Quinn Williams. I went back. I haven't done a ton of the defense. I did mostly offense on the all 22. But Quinn Williams, he walked back Joel Batonio, the left guard, multiple times on the first drive. He
And
met Carl
Antonio's a good
Lawson.
player.
Yeah, and yeah, I was just about to say Batonio is probably one of their best offensive linemen that they have. So for him to win multiple one-on-ones against Batonio is huge. He met Lawson at Brissett for a half sack. I also wanted to give a small shout out to Lawson and JFM. I know the stats don't show it, but they were working their one-on-ones. And if it wasn't for the fact that Brissett was getting the ball out of his hands pretty quickly, they would have disrupted the pocket a little bit more than we would have liked. Another player, Jordan Whitehead. I know you pointed it out that they were the worst safety duo through 2 weeks on PFF, but you could tell from week 1 to week 2 that he was playing hurt. He really put everything he had into playing Sunday, and that's not an excuse for his poor play. He had 4 missed tackles in week 2, so obviously you want to see him clean that up. But for somebody to go out there game 2 with their new team, played 100% of the snaps, and really gave it his all, I'll give him a pass just because the grade is bad or whatever. But I think, like you said, with the rankings, we got to give it a couple more games to let those grades settle out to what they really will be. So Jordan Whitehead was one. And then you mentioned him up at the top, Brandon Eccles. He came in, he had 5 total snaps. First down, they ran to his side. No surprise. They were deep into the red zone. They were going to run to his side and force him to make a play. He had a half tackle with Sheldon Rankins. Second play, isolated against Njoku on the perimeter, was able to pull Njoku out of bounds on the goal line fade, which is a heads-up play. He would have got 2 feet in if he didn't pull him that slight bit out of bounds. So great on second down. Then third down, the pass breakup when Martin and Quan Alexander had the pressure on Jacoby Brissett. So 3 great plays in a row. I have a stat here. It's small sample size, 5 snaps for Brandon Eccles on Sunday. His PFF grade was a 93.7. For comparison, when Bryce Hall was on the field in week 1, obviously different opponent, different situations. He played 5 total reps, His PFF grade was a 44.2. So to see Brandon Eccles come in, and he wasn't looked at as cornerback 3 entering the season. He was cornerback 4 in the coach's eyes. He came in, he stepped up, he made a ton of plays. I was so happy to see him come in, and this is exactly why Saleh preached rookies getting snaps early on for these moments, because when they come in their second, third, fourth year as the backup, they've seen these situations before. They know what to expect more often than not every time, because they're not perfect. But yeah, Eccles was my guy on defense. I don't know if you had any specific players to highlight, but before I get into my questions, I'll let you highlight anybody that you had on defense.
Yeah, I actually had on my notes one of the same guys you had, Jordan Whitehead. Injured or not, I feel, again, it's 2 games, it's very early, but I feel like through the first couple of weeks he's been probably the biggest disappointment to me.
Yeah.
He's missed a lot of tackles. Like when they brought him in, and I watched some of his film in Tampa Bay, I thought, oh, this guy's he's gonna help shore up the run defense, because their play against the run last season was not very good. Their safeties weren't great in run support, and in Tampa Bay, Jordan Whitehead was. But the other day, I mean, he was a non-factor, and I'm watching it. That again, I've had these conversations with you, with other people, like. You get tired. Like, is this going to be another guy who comes here and just for some reason doesn't play the way he used to? It's not like he's a 33, 34-year-old veteran and you're like, well, he hit the wall.
Right. Yeah.
This is still a young guy who
25
in Tampa Bay was an absolute monster against the run. And then I'm watching teams, watching him be a non-factor. Again, it's 2 weeks, but it's still that kind of jumped out at me on defense. Eccles, of course, that was something, when I saw that Hall was inactive and Eccles wasn't, I thought, did Hall just get jumped on the depth chart?
Right. Yep.
I think that may be the case. Or will it be week to week? Will it be, you guys are kind of on even footing, and whoever has the better week of practice is going to be the active one.
Yep.
Which is nothing wrong with that. So, that was really nice to see from him. The on defense on the defensive line, they did win some of their matchups, but I'm at the point where it's like, I feel like for years now we've been saying that, like, they, and I mean, there are times when it's true, like the ball was coming out quick, or you're playing Lamar Jackson, they played a quarterback who runs around a lot. But you know what? Other teams with talented defensive fronts find a way to get to the quarterback. Not all the time, not every week, but we're 2 games in now. You got 1 sack. And that's why. And well, I'll hold this for for when we talk about the matchup this week. I had some thoughts on the matchup against the Bengals and why it's what is a fair comparison to some years past and this Sunday situation.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought up D line because I forgot this in my point. But I have right here the defensive line snap percentages through 2 games.
Mm,
Obviously, very small sample size. Again, we're gonna preach that, but I have the 4 starters. So that's Lawson, Quinnen, Rankins, Franklin Myers, and then I have the 2 rookies. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts about the rotation and if that specifically could be part of the reason why the production might not be there. So Carl Lawson, 55.1%. He leads all edge rushers. Quinnen Williams, 60.36. He leads all defensive tackles on the team, not in the NFL, obviously.
right.
Uh, Rankins, 56.1%. Franklin Myers, 48.1%. And then Jermaine Johnson, 33.4%. And Michael Clemens, 38.6%. So it seems like it's up a little bit more than clearly what the defensive staff was putting out in the summertime about these 35 rep caps. I think that was all overblown to begin with. But hearing those numbers, in the higher 50s, 60s for some like Quinnen, is that enough for you, or do you want to see a little bit more and that might lead to a little bit more production out of this defensive line?
My only major problem is Quinnen Williams. I mean,
Yeah.
he's one of your best
Yeah.
players. Keep him on the field. I did it this offseason. I looked at sort of, the top 5 or 10 ranked DTs in the NFL, and I think Quinnen Williams had a lower snap percentage than all of them. A lot of these guys play 75, 80, 85%. Aaron Donald plays 90 plus sometimes. Some teams just say, look, my best player is staying on the field. And the Jets, they've done it for years now with Quinnen Williams. I guess they're just going to keep doing it, but I think it's something that it's going to make his contract situation interesting, because do you pay a guy like if you're trying to sign Quinnen Williams and you have another team that's like, hey man, we're going to play you 85% of the snaps and we're going to pay you, let's say $17 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, do the Jets then match that with a plan of playing him less and say, well, we'll give you $17 million, but you're not going to do as much for us because we're not going to play you as often.
Right.
And now you're paying the same premium price knowing you're going to get less production.
Exactly. It's backwards.
You're going to have to promise to pay him like, basically teams are going to pay him like a guy who's going to play 80 to 85% of the snaps, and the Jets are either going to have to let him walk or match it and still play him 65% of the time.
Yeah.
And if I'm the owner, I'm going to need a really good reason for that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you draft a guy 3rd overall. I'm trying to pull up his Pro Football Reference stats, but I believe he's just been like hovering in that 56 to 58. I think one year might have been 63 at the most snaps.
Yeah.
So this is what he is in his career, and I don't think it's on him as a player. I think maybe there are some times where he does get a little gassed and he does have to come off the field. Maybe it's just him as a person, but when I see, TV angles, looking at Quinnen Williams, he's got his hand on his hips and his mouth's open and this and that. And like, I don't know if that's just Quinnen's like mannerisms when he's just, standing there waiting for the play to begin or whatever, but he just looks a little bit more tired than everybody else. So I don't know if that, I'm not saying he's out of shape, whatever. I think he is in really good shape, but I just noticed that on the broadcast when I went to rewatch, and I thought that was interesting. But yeah, he was the one for me that I think needs to step up a little bit in snaps. I think Carl Lawson could be closer to 60 as well. Obviously, they're trying to ramp him back up. They're not trying to give him way too much workload, and Salo alluded to that. It's going to be a couple weeks for him to really ramp up. But before we, fully dive into the Bengals matchup, I just wanted to ask you, sticking with the D-line, should Bryce Huff be activated for the Bengals? I think he gives us something that maybe Jacob Martin does from a skill set perspective in terms of speed and bend, but he does that with a little bit more run upside. So I feel like this is like a no-brainer at this point. You've seen him a healthy scratch for 2 games, not really productive D-line play outside of a couple snaps here and there. So who do you on the D-line, downgrade if you do from the D-line room, or do you just upgrade Bryce Huff and say somebody else has to not dress from a different position?
Yeah, I probably sit somebody else. I mean, I'd have to sit down with a 53 in front of me to see who.
Sure.
But Solomon Thomas. I mean, the thing is, he's an interior guy. You're not going to sit him to to activate Huff, but
Yeah, it's always tough.
I don't know. I feel like
Clemens, maybe, but like,
Clemens has actually been better against the run than I thought he would be. But
right, exactly.
and he's he hasn't had a ton of opportunities. I don't think you need to sit him. I think Thomas is a guy, maybe because he was drafted so high and now he's like
Hmm.
sort of a fringe rotational. I don't know. I would probably trim from somewhere else
I think so
and add
too.
another D lineman to keep to see what you can do against this Bengals offensive line that's struggling right now.
Yeah, but for sure, yeah, he's definitely got to be active this game because if not now, when? I feel like you're already
Right.
upset or not upset, but not as happy with the pass rush as you are. I listened to Salah's press conference from yesterday, not today, and he wasn't happy. He said it's got to be better. He's like, this is what we're built upon. So if the front four can't get home, it's going to be an issue. I see somebody in the chat asking, is blitzing illegal now? And I think it's very rare in our defense. Yeah, I don't think it's illegal, but it's definitely they're going to do their thing, front four, and that's it. So we're going to need more production. And if Bryce Hall can give you a little spark out of that, I think that's super exciting. Quick touch on special teams. Obviously, I mentioned it. They were the savior of the day 3 times. First play was the trick fake punt pass by Mann to Jeff Smith. People that realize why Jeff Smith's on the roster over Denzel Mims. This is the situation why, because if Denzel Mims was out there playing gunner, defenses would have keyed on that, even if he was the gunner on the top of the depth chart. I think the fact that Jeff Smith isn't that, known of a wide receiver, it made that play work. So it was great. Obviously the onside kick that was set up by the Corey Davis blown coverage, just giving us a chance. Will Parks, Justin Hardy, they made the play. And then, Braden Mann was named special teams player of the week, which is always cool. After a stinker of week 1, they bring in your potential replacement, and then you go out and ball out. They said he had a back injury. So I think, we'll give him a little pass, but I don't know how much of a pass. I think that's a little
I'm
covering
not
for your
buying that
team.
for a second.
Yeah, right. So, but Greg Zuerlein, bounce back game. He only hit, he was 0 for 2 last week and now, or 1 for 2 on extra
1 for 2
points.
and missed an extra point.
And then the field goal was just bad. Banged it from 57. It had no rotation or a weird rotation on it. And
Yeah, like a knuckleball.
I was like, oh no, this is not even going to make it to the crossbar, but it was good. It looked like it was going to be good from 60. Glad he hit it. The only negative on special teams was the Marcel Harris penalty. We don't really need to spend too much time on that. Just boneheaded. You just got to be smarter.
The thing that surprises me most about that is that you're like, he might be the 49th or 50th guy on the roster. Like,
right.
You really got to watch yourself as it is.
You're the guy getting
in the
cut
NFL.
if they bring in a guy.
When you're a guy who's barely hanging on and you just shove somebody at the end of a play and get a flip. I mean, that's the most, like, if it's, listen, it's not excusable no matter who does it. But if it's like a backup, like Harris is like a, what is he, 3rd, 4th string? Like, he's not a guy that they're going to look at and go, oh, we can't afford to let him go. And it's dumb regardless, but it's dumber when you're not a higher level player. It's like Jimmy Johnson used to say, different thing because different positions, but he would say, if I caught a guy sleeping in the meeting room, he's cut.
Yeah.
Or during, if we're watching film and I see somebody asleep, he's cut. If it's Troy Aikman, I say, hey Troy, wake up. But if it's a special teams guy, he's off the roster.
Yeah.
Like, you got to know where you're, like the hierarchy of the roster and where you are. And if you're not, especially you're not even in the top 22, you're not a starter. You better reel it in and not get yourself, find yourself unemployed.
Yeah, it's funny, and I'll tease it a little bit. We'll talk about, potentially a player getting treated differently because of a certain position that he plays compared to everybody else. And it's all speculation, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So yeah, I mean, other than that, were there any other things that stood out to you from this victory here? And what exactly does it say for a young team moving forward after one of these most improbable victories?
Well, again, it just shows that this roster, that it's got a lot of talent. We talked about it before. I sent that tweet out a few days ago saying that if you look at the last 10 wide receivers the Jets have drafted, Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson, will probably by midseason be ranked 1 and 2. I mean, the Jets have been so bad at receiver for so long.
Yep.
Now, and we've talked, you look at Elijah Moore, you watch the All-22, box score be damned. That dude is wide open. And it was the same thing last year. I saw people last year dogging him out after the first 4 or 5. This guy's not doing anything. He's not producing. And I'm like, he's wide open. Like, what more do you want him to do? The ball isn't being thrown to him. So, yes, watching these young players perform at a high level early on, getting some quality starts out of Max Mitchell is huge when you can get those late picks to step in and contribute. And they're really getting that from the whole rookie class, with the exception, of course, of Ruckert, who had his first target this week or of the year and dropped it. But, he played a handful of snaps, not a big deal. It was somewhat of a tough catch. Ball was a little bit behind him as he ran toward the sideline. So still has to catch that ball. But it's just a lot of fun to watch this young draft class. And hopefully, they keep trending that way.
Yeah, last week I remember sitting up here begging for a little bit more Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson. And although it wasn't both of them, I'm cool with it. Whoever it is, any week, as long as it's somebody that is going off for the Jets, I'm happy. And if it's one of the younger guys like Moore, Wilson, Breece Hall, even Michael Carter, I'm even happier. If it's a vet, obviously I'm going to be happy. But I think when it's the young guys making plays, that really gives me extra, because that's a guy that Joe Douglas drafted. He handpicked that guy. It's cool when you sign a free agent and he comes in and he produces, because he might have produced for your other team. Like Corey Davis was a high draft pick. So if he came in and produced at a top 5 pick level, nobody would really be surprised. But when you pick a guy at 10 overall, like Garrett Wilson, he comes in and he's routing up dudes, and he's only 21 years old, and he's already getting 22 targets, leading the team after 2 weeks. There's a PFF stat that is like threat percentage. It's your total number of routes run versus how many times you're targeted. They say 30 is good for a wide receiver. He had 38% threat percentage. So whenever he was running a route, Joe Flacco was looking for him. I hope Zach Wilson does the same thing. But yeah, that got me excited. Way more than anything else was the young guys putting on for the team. So, all right, done with the recap. Let's move forward. Just like Salah said, we're on to the next one. We're not going to spend a ton of time. Obviously, we do a show on Thursday, so we have to bottle up a little bit of our emotion for a couple of days. But we've kind of been on to Cincinnati, looking at their team a little bit. I just had a couple of notes here, and then I'll pass it to you to what your thoughts on the surface. But Cincinnati's 0-2. Heartbreaking loss last week to Cooper Rush and the Dallas Cowboys, 20-17, a last-second field goal from 50 yards. This is their second game this year, coming down to one score. Their first game, I believe, was an overtime 23-20 loss to Pittsburgh, a game in which Joe Burrow did not look good. He threw 4 interceptions. But this overall, the team, when you look at it on paper, at least, obviously they were in the Super Bowl last year, so they're a very good team, but they're talented on defense, and their offense is super explosive. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, they're a duo that's going to be a problem for a long time. Burrow, however, is not perfect, can get a little uncomfortable. I watched the TV copy of the Dallas game, and he was yelling, pretty much getting frustrated at the sidelines that they were running empty formations a lot and not really, just putting 5-man protections on him and not really giving him help. And then defensively, they're a solid defense, but I think the Jets match up with them super well. We'll get into it a little bit more, but just on the surface, I think the Jets have a matchup advantage in a couple of spots. So what were your thoughts when you just looked at the Bengals overall and their season so far?
Well, I think, they're a dangerous team right now. Anytime you have a team that's as talented as the Bengals are, and I tweeted this out the other day, and you follow football for long enough and you'll see that when teams are 0-2 and talented teams, it is so rare that they go to 0-3. I mean, they because if you go to 0-3, you can make the case that your season's over. Like teams that start 0-3 and make the playoffs is insanely rare. I mean, that being said, the Bengals are good enough. They could start 0-4 and win 8-9 in a row. Like, they have enough talent to do that, but you don't want to put yourself behind the 8 ball like that. So I think and oftentimes what you see, even though they are so explosive, dynamic wide receivers, I think Jamar Chase versus Sauce is going to be so much fun. That was one, when the schedule came out, I thought, when we knew the Jets had Sauce and we knew those two teams were going to be meeting, it's like, that's going to be a fun matchup. So I think that, I think that the Bengals are a dangerous team at 0-2 because again, talented teams usually find a way to win. Funny enough, with them having these great wide receivers with Higgins and Chase, you may see them come out because teams oftentimes it's even though it's a passing league, when teams are struggling and trying to settle things down, they'll come out run heavy and like back to basics, back to fundamentals, control the clock, run the ball. So you might see the Jets' run defense get tested a little bit more than you'd expect, and it'll be another chance for us to see how far along they are. But this Bengals team, again, the biggest things right now, they have the receivers to make plays, but their offensive line is struggling. Lael Collins, I believe, has been ruled out. Or he's at least on the
He
injury.
didn't participate the last 2 days. I know that. Out might
Yeah,
be.
I saw a
It's
tweet
on the
earlier.
table.
I can't remember. I shouldn't have said that. I'm not 100% sure he's out. But even if he's playing, he's obviously dinged up.
Yep.
So this is a chance. This is the note I was gonna or the comment I was gonna make earlier about this Jets D line. If you think back just a few years ago when the Jets had, when it was Leonard Williams and Sheldon Richardson and these big time guys, there was supposed to be this great defensive line, and it just never panned out. I remember like the expectations were so high, and I remember at one point, even though they weren't getting to the quarterback, I was like, "I'll give it time, give it time." They got to gel, they got to whatever. And then they had a stretch of about 3 or 4 games. I forget. I don't remember who they were playing, but they had 3 or 4 games in a row where every single week the opposing team had at least one, if not like 2 or 3 starting offensive linemen who were ruled out for the game with injuries. And I thought, oh, this is the game. This is the week they're gonna go off.
It's got to be.
And they never did.
Yeah.
And that's when I had to accept, like, these guys aren't as good as we thought because they're literally it's a crop of first round picks on the D line, and they're playing backups every week, and they couldn't sniff the quarterback. And that was like the reality check, like, oh, or that was reality hitting. Like, oh, I guess these guys just aren't as good as I thought they were. That happens once, maybe you write it off, but 3-4 games in a row, you're playing, everyone's got their backup tackle, their backup guard, and you can't sniff the quarterback. They better get to the quarterback this week. There's no excuses for it. Only reason you can justify it this week is if, as I said, if the Bengals come out and just run it. Usually a lot of quick play action, but get to the quarterback. And especially this is supposed to be the strength of the defense, and you've got Lawson, and we're excited about Clemens, and we've talked about Huff, and we've talked about Martin. Of course, Quinnen Williams in the middle. Like, this is the game. If they come out of this game with a sack and a half and not a lot of pressures, you got to like start looking at it and go, are we overrating these guys? And one note just now from one of our viewers, only one team's made the playoffs in the last 20 years after starting off 0-3. Can't confirm that off the top of my head. Thanks a lot for that. And another note about the Jets being able to stop the screen pass. I feel like I've been saying that for about 25 years. Like the Jets, I would say maybe 2 or 3 times in the last 25 years have been able to stop the screen. And what makes it so infuriating is you play the Patriots twice a year, and every time it's 3rd and 8, they run a screen and they convert.
Yes, exactly. And the screen heaviest team.
Yeah, and the Jets can't run one or haven't been able to run one. It's like such a basic, essential weapon in an offense. And for decades, the Jets can't stop one and they can't run one. Had some success with Bilal Powell a while back, but just not consistently. Hopefully with this group, we see a little bit more, especially, Carter and Hall being able to catch the ball. But they got to clean that up. They got to start, because teams are just going to keep running it until they show they can stop it.
Yeah, this has to be the breakout game for at least one person on the defensive line. It doesn't have to be every single person, but if 1, 2, maybe 3 guys are winning their matchups, I think this will be the game that could change that narrative of, okay, well, we've been hyped up about this vaunted pass rush in practice all this whole summer. And even last summer, he was talking about how good the pass rush could be. Obviously, it fell flat on its face, but this year it has reason for optimism. So you do want to see them come out strong and firing and get at least, I don't want to put a number on it, but more than 2-3 sacks. Like, this is what we want to see this week specifically. I have a stat here about Joe Burrow's pressures. This comes from PFF, but Joe Marino from the Draft Dudes podcast originally said it, so I wanted to give him credit too. of Joe Burrow's 13 total sacks this season, 6 in week 1, 7 in week 2, he has a pressure rate of 30.9%, so slightly under the league average of 31.6. So that's okay. But he is first in pressure to sack rate, meaning the amount of times that a normal pressure will then become a sack, meaning more often than not, that's a QB issue more than an O-line issue.
Yeah.
His rate is 38.2, where the league average is 18.7. So he's more than doubled the rate of pressure to sack rate according to PFF. I think that bodes well for the Jets defense, obviously, especially like you said, if they come out firing, if they get an early sack on the first drive or two and really get in Joe Burrow's head, like, hey, I might not be able to step up in the pocket. I got Lawson and, Franklin Myers coming off the edge, but I can't step up into Quinn Williams' face. He knows what happened last year. I'm pretty sure one of the D linemen had a sack against him. I think it was John Franklin Myers had a sack against Joe Burrow. So he knows what this defensive line can do. So I thought that pressure percentage stat was a little intriguing and a matchup where the Jets could take advantage. Another matchup, and I had this teased here on the screen share, was when I went and looked at the Bengals defense. And this bodes well for the Jets again, because the Jets under Rob Saleh, at least he said he wants to be, I don't know if that's hard to read there. I might have to zoom it in. But Rob Saleh said that this team is a 12 personnel based team, which means one wide receiver or one running back and 2 tight ends, excuse me. Yeah, this is a little too choppy to see on the screen there. But the Jets are a 12 personnel team, meaning one running back, 2 tight ends. So obviously Uzama being down last week showed them a lot more 11 than 12, probably more than they wanted to. But when Cincinnati was playing against 12 personnel, they went from a 4-3 with 4 down linemen look to more of a 3-4 look. They brought in a nose tackle named Josh Tapua. He wears number 68, so I had no idea. I had to look him up. Defensive linemen wearing 60s are always backups. So I wanted to see what they did against 12 personnel and the Cowboys. And the Cowboys ran a ton of 12 personnel, and they were very successful running the ball. So I think in the run game, if they go out and they do this 3-4 look and they bring in this backup nose tackle, I think the Jets could take advantage from a run perspective. But I put it in the chat in the tweet here. If they go pass against this this personnel package for the Bengals, especially cover 1, I have it here. I think they could take advantage of the hole shots deep down the outsides of the field. If people remember Denzel Mims' 40-yard catch from last year, that's a hole shot right between the squatting cornerback and the safety over the top. So if they are able to take advantage of those couple of looks when they get into 12 personnel, and they didn't run it enough week 2. I think they had 13 snaps out of 70 something were 12 personnel. So not enough at all, obviously game script, but I want to see more 12 personnel in the first half. And I think that will set up a lot of the things that the Jets want to do on offense. So just looking at those couple of things, what were your takeaways from the Bengals in general? And is there anything else that the Jets can do to get to 2-1, which again, just sounds so wild saying that out loud.
Yeah, listen, you gotta take advantage of their shortcomings on the O-line and the way they're playing right now. And the stat on Burrow, if he's being sacked at almost twice the rate as most quarterbacks, you have to wonder if there's something going on in his head. Like, why isn't he pulling the trigger? It's not like he doesn't have the targets, right? Like he's got the weapons to throw to.
For sure.
Aside from the receivers, Mixon can catch the ball out of the backfield. So whatever's going on there, maybe the Jets take advantage of it and dial up some blitzes this week. I'd love to see that. I think that ideally you want to win with 4 guys up front, because then you're not having to give anybody up in coverage. You're making life that much tougher on the quarterback. But if you're, it's almost like a blood in the water type thing. Like, do you leave it up to the 4 guys up front to win, or do you just say, you know what, these guys can't pass block right now. We're going to blitz consistently early on and see if we can, force a fumble, force a bad throw and an interception, and that type of thing. So I think the thing the Jets need to change from week 1 and 2, they need to blitz a lot more this week, at least, like I said, early on, and see how Cincinnati handles it. If Cincinnati shows they can handle it, then maybe you go, all right, fine, go back to rushing 4, don't blitz as frequently. But I'm going to try to, if I'm the Jets, I'm going to try to take advantage early on of the Bengals' struggles and the way that O-line is played. And I'm going to send extra guys, early and often and see if it gets you anywhere.
Yeah, I think there was a red zone blitz from Quan Alexander last week, and I want to say there was a corner blitz from the Jets week 1. Michael Carter came off the edge, but other than that, you don't really see them dialing up a ton of pressures unless it's really like a third down situation. So I do want to see them getting after it, especially like if they stop them on 1st and 10 and it's 2nd and 10 then, or 2nd and 9 even. Dial up a pressure then when they're not expecting it. Do something just slightly different. I just wanted to put this comment in here and we can move on after this. Saleh needs to be better with time management. I agree. I think his time management has been a little poor, especially, obviously last year, rookie year, but coming into this year, that was an issue we wanted to see fixed. I think he got a little lucky with some of the things that happened after those time management issues, but neither here nor there. When we're talking about a win, I think it's easier to gloss over those, but in the future, we definitely need to monitor. I know we need to get to the draft stuff, but I did want to ask you real quick about Zach Wilson. Because this has been talk around a lot of Jets outlets. I know how you feel offline, but I want you to let everybody else know. If Flacco has this offense humming, I'll use that word because I don't want to say on fire or anything else because this is a Jets offense at the end of the day. If he has it humming and they're looking good, do you go to Zach? Or like Saleh said, he's going to be on the field when he's healthy. Do you actually believe that? Or do you think if Joe Flacco's throwing for 350 and 4 touchdowns every week for the next 2 games, this might be Joe Flacco's job? How do you see this breaking down?
Well, I think what's interesting here is I understand that, it's Zach Wilson's team and he's the future, and I get all that. But a few things at play that make me pause and wonder is, one, Robert Saleh wasn't as sort of, he was, I don't want to say non-committal, but like when that question was posed to him, what happens if Joe? The answer I expect is it's Zach's team. Zach's the quarterback.
Yes.
When Zach's healthy, Zach's starting. But not only he didn't say, Zach will be on the field, and the whole. Well, okay, the other thing I want to touch on is, let's not forget how bad this team has been for how long. Like, this team has been terrible. Fans are dying for some quality football.
Yep.
Like, they're fed up. And a lot of that is, whether you're a diehard or a casual fan. And I think the diehards, the lunatics like us who pay way too much attention to this team, we're the ones thinking, Zach's the future. He's got to be the guy. Whereas the casuals are just like, hey, man, as long as they're winning or, as long as the offense is fun to watch and they score much points, I'm happy. Like, right. I wonder if let's say they lose this week, but it's, sort of, 31-28, like another big offensive day. And then they win next week because Zach doesn't have a full week of practice and they beat Pittsburgh, 28-17 or something like that. Like, I wouldn't put it past ownership to say, listen, this is the best we've played in a decade. So let's stick with this guy for now. And kind of put some pressure on Saleh. And part of the reason I think that is, I don't want to say a foreshadowing or it's already happening, but this is really weird, the 110% thing. Yes. Saleh said a couple times now, we're not putting Zach Wilson out there until he's 110%. Okay, so why is this weird? Okay, it's the NFL. Like, we hear especially late fine, maybe weeks 1 through 3 or 4, fine. But when you get to weeks 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, you hear guys all the time. Nobody's 100%. Everybody's hurt. Everyone's playing hurt. This is the NFL. So is this 110% standard that they've now have for Zach Wilson? Does that apply all year? When he's finally at 110%, whatever that means, spiritually, physically, emotionally, across the board, he's got to be all 110s. When he gets to that point and he has his first start and he rolls his ankle and it's a little bit sore and now he's 88%, does he go back to the bench again? Right. Does he only play when he's 110%? And if not, why not? Like, if he can play at 95% 3 weeks from now, why can't he play at 95% next week? Exactly. It's a really weird position to take. My thought is what they should be saying is he's the quarterback, and when he's cleared, he's playing. And the language they're using, I don't think they're going to throw Zach under the bus. And I'm not saying Zach is doing this, but there's part of me that would wonder with any player, is the player saying this? Like,
Right.
is the young quarterback saying, I'm not risking my future until I feel right, I'm not going out there. And it's the 110% emotionally or psychologically, whatever Salah said. Like, is he referencing maybe Zach saying, until I feel ready, I'm not going
Mhm.
out there? In which case the team, because again, this is, a long way down the road and hopefully somewhere they never get to. But I could see that being a thing in the locker room where a little resentment, I know the rules are different for quarterbacks with just about everything.
Mhm.
But throughout the season, you're going to have guys who are hurt and you're going to be asking them to suit up. Hey man, I know you got a bad shoulder. I know you landed on your elbow and da. I know you're probably only 80% right now, but we really need you. We need you to suit up.
Yeah.
Oh, but Zach had to be 110% before he could go out there, but you want me to go out there hurt and at a fraction of the salary, like, and especially, I don't know, that's a little too far down the road, but it's just such a weird thing. Like, he's
Mhm.
not going out there till he's emotionally 110% ready. It sounds to me like they're saying everything they can now to explain weeks from now why he's still not playing.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. And I don't want to, like you said, I don't want to assume that it's coming from the player's side and they're just trying to protect him. But at the end of the day, we know Zach Wilson's parents are they're very smart. His dad was a former football player, so he knows the extensive, injuries that come with football. And his mom is a very, protective mom from her social media account. She's always, you know, trying to not shelter her children, but just protect them from the outside world because there's tons of terrible things in this outside world that kids should not be exposed to. But you could just tell that his parents aren't stupid essentially, and they're not going to allow him to put himself in a bad situation. Not saying it is all on him. I think a lot of it is the team. And Salah was told, hey, the earliest we were told was Pittsburgh. That means it's not coming from him. It's coming from the medical team. So if that's just the earliest that they can play him, that just, I think, to me sounds like they're hoping that he can get back to full to full practice by Pittsburgh, which doesn't mean he's going to play Pittsburgh. I think he's going to play the week after. If I had to guess right now, I'd say he plays the week after. I think that's the Miami game, which I'll actually be at in person. So that'll be cool if that's the return of the Zach. But yeah, it's very troublesome. I hope they're not giving him special treatment and protecting him, because the last thing I want to hear is that they're protecting a quarterback in year 2, that they're trying to figure out who they have for the future. But at the
Yeah,
same
if you're
time,
trying to figure out if he's the guy and he's 85% and
you
you're
play
not
him.
playing him.
Yeah, this is silly. But at the same time, I will say if Flacco is humming and the offense looks good, does the development of one Zach Wilson trump the development of the 10 other players on offense? Because if the offense is going to look bad under Zach Wilson, or whatever it's going to look like, if it's looking good, these players have confidence. You can't just rip that confidence out from under them and now they're 2 targets a game instead of 8 targets a game. So it's very, very washy. I know we need to move on to the draft stuff real quick, but that was just a weird one for me, that it's going to be hard to, and we got to watch it every day. We're going to be watching it close to see exactly the wording that they use, the timing of it all. So it's going to be tough. I hope Zach's back for Pittsburgh, but if I'm putting money on it, it's the week after in Miami.
Yeah.
Um, we'll just rapid fire a couple of these draft guys. I'll let you go first. Just give both your guys, take as much time as you need, and then I'll close the show with my 2 guys, and we'll get out of here and hopefully watch Pittsburgh lose to the Browns.
All right. So I'll just throw out one game, 2 teams, because they both
Mm-hmm.
have guys that I like. Oregon, of course, Noah Sewell, a guy that Jets fans should be watching with given their need at linebacker,
Yes.
one of the top guys in the class. And they also have a center, Alex Forsythe, who's a good player, somebody to keep an eye on. And they're playing Washington State, and that's really convenient because I watched Washington State the other day, and I'll tell you what, they've got a linebacker named Dan Healy, and that dude looked incredible.
Okay.
And they said mid broadcast, he's a converted wide receiver. Doesn't play like one, runs great speed, and is not afraid to stick his face in the fan. So Dan Healy is a guy to keep an eye on. Funny enough, the day I watched that game, a little later, Jim Nagy, Senior Bowl, sent a tweet out about Healy. I think that's happened about 3 times this year. I watch a game and Nagy tweets about a player a few minutes later. They also have an edge guy, Ron Stone, and a tackle, Jarrett Kingston. He's listed as interior O-line. He plays left tackle for them right now, and he's looked pretty good in the games I've watched, so I'm looking forward to that one.
Cool. Sounds good. My two guys real quick. I was trying to pull up the matchups, but I can't pull up who they're playing. Just two guys that I watched in the summer that I've been keeping an eye on. Devon A-Chain, running back from Texas A&M. I know the Jets don't have a need at running back that's well documented with Breece Hall and Michael Carter. But this guy, he's 5'9", 180, has a track background. He could take it to the perimeter or one cut up inside and go. Good pass catcher. Obviously, with his limited size, I want to see a little bit more from Pass Pro from him. He made it on Bruce Feldman's Freaks list. So if you're a subscriber to The Athletic, check him out. He's number 35 on the list. He had 910 yards rushing and 9 touchdowns last year. This year, he only has 196 and 2 touchdowns, but that's, I think, Isaiah Spiller leaving and him being the main guy now. Offense or defenses are keying in on him more. So I want to see a little bit more production out of A-Chain, but he's an explosive guy that I'm excited to watch. And then on the flip side, defense, I watched Clemson's defense the past week and a half, a couple prospects on defense, but I want to highlight Miles Murphy, their edge rusher, 6'5", 275. He's a pure 4-3 guy. Tons of pass rush moves, good first step. Even when they have him in a 2-point stand-up stance, I think he could get off the blocks well. I want to see him in more of an attacking role. They have a new defensive coordinator, Wes Goodwin, taking over for Brent Venables, who's been there for, I think, a decade. So a lot of changes on defense schematically, I think. He's doing a lot more crashing on the end man of line of scrimmage, more contains. They even drop him in coverage, which I think is weird. So I want to see a more attack style. Last year, he had 8 sacks, 14.5 tackles for loss. This year, only 2 tackles for loss and a sack. So you want to see his production ramp up a little bit more. Also on Bruce Feldman's freak list, number 3. I didn't do it on purpose. That was an irony. But 2 guys that were on the freaks list, so you know that they have athletic explosiveness, and guys that I watched in the summer and I really liked. So those are my 2 guys. Before we get out of here, I just wanted to say again, I hope everybody's watching the Browns Steelers at 8:20 real closely. Obviously, the Steelers, we play them next week. They might play Kenny Pickett if all goes bad for Mitch Trubisky tonight, which will be interesting. Kenny Pickett in prime time against the Browns defense and Myles Garrett. We saw what happened with Malik Willis against the Bills, coming in just kind of thrown into the fire. Not a good look for your rookie quarterback. So I hope that, that's not the case for Pickett, but if it is, hey, the Jets could be licking their chops next week. Until then, we'll be back on Thursday. I'll try to put out some more film stuff. So if you follow me at Tereman on Twitter, you'll see all my threads. Everybody follow Glenn on Twitter at AceFan23. Be sure to check out our forums on JetNation.com. They're buzzing. Everybody's got topics there. You can just scroll down and find a topic about anything you're choosing. And until next week, let's go Jets.